Hello, everybody. Welcome to ElixirConf. Yay, we're all here. Woohoo! All right. So welcome to Beyond LiveView, getting the JavaScript you need, keeping the Elixir you love. I am Chris Nelson. You can find me at SuperChris on the Twitters. Eventually, I'll move all the way to GenServer Social, but for now, I'm mostly Twittering, sadly, or whatever it's called now. But who am I? I am Chris Nelson, like I said. I am a fairly long time, or at least certainly old Elixirist. I was talking about Elixir back in 2015, I guess, so at least that dates me a little bit. I'm also the co-founder of LaunchScout. We do custom software development in Cincinnati, mostly in Elixir. We really love Elixir a lot. And I'm also the creator of a couple things which I'll be talking about today, LiveElements and LiveState, and I'm going to tell you guys about what they are. But the main things that I want to talk about today, I want to talk about when we would want to go beyond LiveView. And to start with, we really love us some LiveView. That's kind of our go-to way to build apps anymore. We love it a lot. But there are a couple scenarios where we need to go beyond what LiveView gives us out of the box that I want to talk about. The first one is when we want or need to extend our LiveView app with some JavaScript. And really, that might fall into a couple different cases. I think it's probably more the first one any more than the second one, but sometimes there's just a good JavaScript solution that we really want to just pull in and use rather than build something over again in straight up LiveView. And there are other cases where just doing something for whatever reason, doing it client side is the right move. So I want to talk about like how we can make that experience more productive and more LiveView-ish. And the other scenario that I'm going to talk about is maybe a little less common, but it's something that I'm starting to encounter more and more, which is what if we want to have a LiveView-like experience to build an app that isn't served by Elixir at all? So in this case, we would want our app to live in an environment where, you know, there's some other server serving up the front end of our app, and how can we do that in a way that doesn't suck and gives us a LiveView-like experience? So that's what I'm going to be talking about today. So kind of got a lot to go through in just a little bit of time. So let's talk about the first scenario first. So out of the box, what does LiveView give us for JavaScript integration? We basically have like two options. We have hooks or JS commands. And really JS commands, I'm not sure how extensible they are, so it's really mostly hooks. And they work. They work fine. I make use of them in what I'm going to show you guys here, but they are fairly low level and they are fairly imperative. So if we want really a more like a LiveView-like experience, we'd like something maybe a little bit better. So what I'm really here to kind of advocate, I guess, is I think there's a better way to bridge from LiveView to JavaScript than just the out-of-the-box hooks. And what I find to be the most productive way in the apps that we build is making use of custom HTML elements or web components. And the reasons for this, I think, are fairly easy to understand. LiveView is already really good at rendering HTML. That's what it does, right? It does that really well. And really what we're talking about doing is just extending HTML and making it better and using that as our path to integrate. I think in a lot of ways, HTML elements are a better unit of abstraction. They're higher level. They're more declarative. And I think it's really important, though, as we're talking about this, that we want to use these the right way. We want to follow the really good patterns that LiveView already follows and that lots of, you know, this isn't a new idea, but when we're bridging out to our custom elements, we want to send data in through props and attributes, and we want to have actions come out. And that's an important pattern to follow. So if you haven't seen custom HTML elements before, they are really simple, or at least they can be. So this is like an example of the world's simplest HTML elements, so just so you can see what it looks like if you haven't seen it before. There is no third-party JavaScript code on this slide at all. This is all stuff that is in your browser to use, just to point that out. And this is just a really simple element. We have a class. You know, you can hate on JavaScript classes, that's fine, but that's the way this works. You extend from HTML element. You get a callback hook to implement where you can do whatever you want. In this case, I'm just saying boop. And then I'm defining my element. I'm giving it a tag called say-boop and mapping that tag to my implementation class. And then once I do that, I can just use that element on the page just like any other HTML element, because it is just like any other HTML element. So that's a really simple example. So by using custom HTML elements as our means to integrate, we do have some pretty nifty superpowers that you can really only get this way. I'm not going to go deeply into these topics, but I just want to make reference that they're there, and you really, you know, to get advantage of these things, custom elements are what you have to use and what you want to use. The shadow DOM is essentially inside of a custom element. You have a DOM that is encapsulated from the rest of your page, and that means you have control over what appears there to the precise extent that you want. You also have slots which give you the ability, if you're defining an element, to control what's in the middle of you and how it renders. So the inner content of your element that the page author puts there, you can decide how to render that. You have shadow parts, which give you the ability, if you're authoring a custom element, you can provide hooks for somebody to style individual pieces of your UI to the precise extent that you want to, which is a really powerful tool. And then custom events, which we're going to be talking about a little bit here. You have the ability to make up your own DOM events and give them the payload that's specific for your app. And that's a feature that we're going to make use of as we go on in this talk. So I guess it's worth pointing out, when you're building custom HTML elements, you know, there's this kind of like myth that's out there that you still, you know, use a JavaScript framework and you're still going to be like doing a bunch of complex stuff, and you're still going to be like tied to this framework forever. And while it is true that just building custom HTML elements, which using just the plain vanilla JavaScript spec is a bit low level, but the thing that I really want to point out here is you can build custom HTML elements, you can use a library to help you, but you aren't committed to that library the same way you are when you pick a JavaScript framework. That is because what you're writing are just HTML elements. If you use a library to help you write one HTML element on the page, you use a different library to author another HTML element on the page, that's not a problem at all the same way as it would be if you're saying, like, I want to build an app and I want to write one component in React and one component in Vue. Like, you would never do that. That wouldn't work. But if you're just talking about HTML elements, they don't care. They're still going to work the same way. If they're still just communicating with DOM events, that's just in the browser. There's no problem with that. So using a library to help you, I'm going to suggest that's a pretty good idea, but the thing that I want to point out is it doesn't commit you the same way that you're used to in the JavaScript ecosystem. Because at the end of the day, they're just DOM nodes. You can mix and match all you want. All right, so how do we want to do this? How do we want to actually use custom HTML elements in a LiveView apps? So we want to pass our data in via attributes. But if we are passing in our data, if we have complex data coming into our element, we might want to serialize them as JSON so that they are understood, so that that Elixir data structure comes into our JavaScript app. Okay. I mentioned earlier that we want to have actions to communicate out from our elements. Those are going to want to be custom events, which I'll demonstrate in a little bit. But the problem with that is LiveView doesn't know about custom events. So, well, maybe we might need a hook to help us there a little bit. So man, that sounds like a lot of work, doesn't it? That doesn't sound like super easy. Wow, I wish we had a better way. Okay, so LiveElements is a library that I've come up with and started to use to try to make this an easier problem to solve, to basically make working with custom elements in a LiveView app the same as working with any other functional component. And the way it works is we have a macro that will take a custom HTML element and turn it into or produce a LiveView functional component that wraps it. That functional component is just like any other functional component in LiveView, and it does a few things for us. It will handle custom events out of the box. You declare, here are the custom events that this element can emit. And when you do that, you are then able to handle your custom events just like you do any other handle event in LiveView, and it just works. The other thing that it does is when you're passing data into a custom element via attributes, if they are anything other than primitives, it will serialize them as JSON for you. So it'll just take care of it. So this is easier to see by example, so let's do that. The example I'm going to show you is a thing that you're probably going to want to reach for JavaScript to do, which is a map. You would never like write your own map from scratch in LiveView. Oh, hello. What's up with that? Okay, cool. Instead, you'd probably want to use a JavaScript library to help you. Just to okay. All right, so not sure what's going on with my browser today, in that I can't get out of full screen mode, so okay, well, it'll be okay, I hope. All right, so this is the demo itself, and what I'm doing in this demo, I'm rendering a Google map, and I'm a pilot as well as a software developer. So basically, I have a data set of like all of the airports in the US, and I'm just rendering pins on the map for each airport. And not just like the big airports that you'd be used to, but like little ones like this one. This is where I fly out of, the Butler County Airport in near lovely Cincinnati, Ohio. But of course, I don't want to like load a giant database of all the airports in the US on page load. What I really want to do is like anytime the user pans the map, I want to go fetch just the airports in that area so that I can display the pins. And so what I'm doing is every time the user pans, I need events that are emitted that I can then handle in my LiveView app to requery and just get the right pins to display. So that's what this app is doing. And I need to get back to my slides. And the question is, can I? Oh, okay. We're going to do that. Oh, good. Okay. Whew. I found my slides. And there's the app again. And there's the app again. And there's the app again. Okay. All right. We're back on track. We went to Crazy Town, but we're back. All right. I'm just going to not put that in full screen mode because that was freaking me out, obviously. That's big enough to see, though. Okay. So how does this actually work under the covers? In order to do this, we have two custom elements that we're using. And this is an example of like finding some custom elements that do what I need them to do already and being able to use them in a LiveView app. And in this case, I have two custom elements that I'm using. Lit Google Map, which renders the map itself that we saw. Lit Google Map Marker, which renders each pin that goes on the map. And then this is our LiveView code that we actually, this is like the template itself. And what we've done here, LiveElements is producing the functional component that wraps Lit Google Map for us. So basically the rules are it just like takes the dashes and turns them into underscores. The rules of custom elements are that the tag name has to have a dash in it, so that works for us. And then that functional component It's just a functional component. And when we pass attributes in, they work just like any other functional component. And then the inner content, that's just plain old LiveView code. We're looping over our airports. We're plucking out the lat long and the identifier and the name, and then we're rendering pins using that get lit Google marker tag there. So it's mostly just plain old LiveView. On the view side, this is what we have going on. This is the custom element macro that comes to us from LiveElements. We declare our tag name, and here we declare like a couple custom events that our custom element is already emitting for us. So that element that I pulled, it was already emitting these events. We just needed some way to get those events into LiveView. And this happens for us behind the scenes. So by declaring these events, they are now sent up to LiveView for us. And handling those events, conveniently, both of those events have a payload that's exactly what we want. So for each event, we have two different events. We have a bounds changed event. That is happening every time we pan the map. And we have a tiles loaded event that happens when we first load the tiles for the map. Both of them have a really nice payload that has basically the four corners of the current map area with the lat long. And so we can take those four corners and we just hand them off to our context function, which knows how to do the geo search. That's just plain old Elixir. I'm not going to go into that here, but it's using PostGIS under the covers, as you might expect. And I just grab those airports and I assign. And that's all there is to it. That's the entire code for this example. So it feels like LiveView, it works like LiveView, and wrapping that custom element just turns it into a functional component that we can use. So that works out pretty well. All right. So to summarize this section, oh my gosh, I might have, oof, wow, time goes by quickly. Okay, so it's really easy to use custom elements in LiveView. We can let LiveElements do the work for us, and then we can use them just like any other functional component. So that's kind of the first scenario. All right, let's talk about the second scenario. All right, so I'm going to set this up just a little bit. What the second scenario is about for me in a lot of ways is extending the reach of Elixir. And to do that, I'm going to ask you guys a couple questions. Audience participation time. All right, so how many people know this? What is the percentage of websites served by Elixir? We're going to do Price is Right rules, which means like highest number that's not over the actual answer wins. Anybody want to like take a guess? 0.5, 0.02, 10 to the minus 5. Any other guesses? Okay. The actual answer is, I have no idea. True. So, but like we got a feel for what the possible answer is. Like if it was 5%, we would all like fall over out of our chairs, I think, right? Is that safe? Okay. Next question. What percentage of websites use HTML? It's probably a little higher. What if the only requirement to deploy our Elixir app was an HTML element? Would we have a greater reach? All right. So for the next example, what I want to do is take that first example and take this show on the road. And the question that I'm posing is, what if we wanted to take our map and drop it on an arbitrary website that wasn't served by Elixir at all? What would we have to do to be able to do that? So LiveState is basically the library that I've come up with to be able to implement this kind of a thing. And what it does is it gives us a LiveView-like experience, and I'll show you the code and you can judge for yourself for a non-Elixir hosted app. And the way it works under the covers is there's two different libraries that work together. There is phx-livestate, which is the front-end NPM. It's called phx-livestate because live-state was taken. That's not like an official Phoenix project. I just stole the prefix because I needed one. The backend library is LiveState. It's just a hex package. And what these guys do together, I think I'm just going to jump in and show you. So let's look at some code. So in order to be able to move our LiveView into a custom element, this is what it looks like to use the LiveState front-end library. We have some declaration and configuration which we need to do. In this case, we saw an example of a custom HTML element earlier. This is another custom HTML element that's using a library called lit. I'm not going to go into lit a very great amount, but that custom element tag name is airport-map, and that's where it's declared. LiveState itself is really just a thin abstraction over Phoenix channels. Phoenix channels are doing all the hard work for us, but LiveState lets us build a Phoenix channel that serves state to a front-end component. And basically the front-end component is subscribing to state and dispatching events. That's kind of how the pieces fit together. And so our LiveState connection, because it's a Phoenix channel, we want it to have a topic. And we also say, here are the events that this custom element can dispatch. Those events, we saw those earlier. There's the same we saw earlier, tiles loaded and bounds changed. And then our airport map element, here's where we're declaring the attributes that can be passed into this guy. We have the API key, which is just the Google API key. The URL is the URL we want this custom element to connect back to. Remember, we're going to be putting this element on somebody else's web page that's served from who knows where. We want it to talk to our backend, so we need to tell it the URL of our backend. And then the final property is just our airports. And that's just like the data that we had before. So the template for the component itself, essentially we're just taking that LiveView template we saw earlier and just converting it into, this is the syntax for this is like a JavaScript template literal, but it's really just like looping over our data and displaying it. We're using that same lit Google map element, passing it an API key. We're looping over the airports in the same way, and then we're just displaying markers for each airport. So this is what converting the template side looks like. It's a little bit different, but I think it's close enough, and to me it doesn't feel like too onerous to work with this. But the main point here is the element is just like rendering its state. It's not doing anything super complicated. So those two slides, that is the element. What does it look like to move that LiveView over to LiveState? This is what that looks like. So LiveState, as I said, is a very thin abstraction over Phoenix channels. And so to make a LiveState channel, you are actually just making a Phoenix channel, and you're using a behavior that gives you some callbacks that allow that channel to serve the state to the front-end component. And this is the way it works. We have a init callback, which gives the component its initial state. In this case, the only initial state we need to send down is the API key for Google. And then we have the handle event callbacks. They look pretty much exactly like the LiveView callbacks, and that's by design. We get our bounds changed, our tiles loaded, we get that same event payload. The only difference is that last argument is the state and not the socket. And that is so that every time a state change happens, we can push that new state down to the client for you. Load airports looks exactly the same as it does before. All right, so this is how we use our LiveState component in a front end. We have a web page. We're pulling in the definition of our custom element. In the real world, you'd probably like publish your custom element as an NPM package. In my case, I'm like skipping that part and just grabbing it from ESBuild on the Phoenix app and then using it on the page. It's just an HTML element. So I'm passing in the API key and rendering the map. All right, let's see it actually work. So It's worth pointing out, just to, in case you missed it because I didn't really say it, I have a separate Phoenix app running on a different server from the server that's serving up my slides. So we saw just in a second that it was a Phoenix app on port 4000. Now what we're going to do is we're going to load that same example, but it's running in our server that's serving up our slides. And it's just an HTML file, and that's it. So this HTML file could be like served externally on the internet, connecting back over Nginx, or I'm sorry, ngrok if I had time to do that. But it is a HTML works the same way. I can pan the map. It's sending the events over, getting the data from the back end. I can see that my pins are the way they were before. All right. So that's kind of my last demo, but it's worth pointing out at this point LiveState's been out like a little over a year, and we are starting to actually use it in the wild. The first example that I have is an app called LiveRoom. I was really excited about this one because it's one of the first that I've seen that like I had nothing to do with at all. This guy in Spain found LiveState. He was building a product that's designed to be able to like share customer experiences. So like you want to see what your customer's doing on your website and see their cursor if you're trying to like share a demo with multiple users hitting your website at the same time. This is in beta right now, and it uses LiveState under the covers so that if you want to have the shared cursor experience, it's just a matter of adding an HTML element to your website. You don't have to like move your website over to Phoenix or something. So the other example that I have, this is a client project that we did recently where it's for a specialty medical practice where they have questionnaires that are designed to like classify patients that might be good candidates for a specialty medical procedure. And this questionnaire is it's a custom HTML element that you can add to a specialty practice website. So this whole experience is served up by LiveState, all the questions, all the tracking of the answers, all that stuff. So the data is going back to a separate Phoenix app that's not served on the main web page, and that all happens via LiveState. And then the last example that I have is a project that we've been working on at Launch Scout called LiveElements. And I'm not going to like roll the video, but the basic idea of LiveElements are to try to kind of like take this idea and commercialize it. One of the first examples that we came across was, what if you really wanted to have full interactive e-commerce on like a statically generated website? So let's say your site is just like served up from Gatsby or Astro or Eleventy. It's just plain old HTML, but you'd like to add an element that lets you add items to a shopping cart that displays the full shopping cart, and that data is all served by us at elements.launchscout.com. So we have like an add to cart button, a cart button, and those are just plain old HTML. You actually use Stripe to actually have the product data. You connect your Stripe account, it pulls in your products, and that's what you can use to purchase and do the e-commerce. So hopefully that made sense, but I don't want to like launch into that as a whole deal. So yeah, in closing, because we're running up on time, my radical suggestion is we should use HTML to build web apps, because HTML is actually a lot better than you might think. And that's kind of me. So.